Get the cream, precious metals or the crypto things. Your bars are light like the one that's on a Smith machine. But my Maxwell and I ain't speaking about the pretty wings. Watch a
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Shawn Michaels concurring with The Undertaker, his concurring opinion. Much like the Supreme Court of Pro Wrestling, Shawn Michaels has done a concurring opinion, but it's a much nicer take than Undertaker's. So Shawn says, quote, "Every now and then, when they complain about pretty much anything, we give them a little come to Jesus chat. I'm pretty good about not being the bitter old timer. I screwed up a bunch and tried to show them the error of particular ways. It's a different business. Some of it's for the better. It's a much healthier atmosphere than it was when I started. There are some people who argue that it makes them a little softer. I can't disagree with that in some respects, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it can't be better. It can't be shaped up. We have a great culture here that Hunter put in place a decade ago. It's something we continue to build on. Every now and then, we need to remind them of just how great it is to do this line of work, how good it is they have to do it. And obviously, getting the opportunity to jump outside of the state of Florida and come to the state of Texas is going to be a blast for everybody." So, it's not just that the people are soft. He's also talking about entitlements. You know, one of the things he says here, every now and then we need to remind them of how great it is to do this line of work and how good it is they have to do it. Okay, so we know that back in the day, you know, the good old back in my day, guys were not paid to train. They paid other people to train them. They were not paid to train. Guys and girls are now being paid to go to NXT. You know, they go to NXT, then they complain that they aren't paid enough. I think that was this, I did a video maybe 2 or 3 years ago from a guy named Caesar Bonini or whatever. He was an immigrant from some country, and he complained that he wasn't paid enough to be in NXT. And you see people, I think Killer Kelly said something similar when she was in NXT UK. She talked about how she was probably paid more on the independents and all this kind of stuff. So they kind of forget that when you are being trained, and training is part of your job, that you used to pay out of pocket to train. It wasn't that, you know, you were recruited and then they gave you all these incentives, like try to help you find an apartment, trying to help you do all this stuff. That does make you soft. It makes you entitled because it makes you seem like, hey, this company wants you, not you want them. And that's the name of the business. That's how the business has changed. Business used to be that you wanted to get in, and you wanted to get in so badly that you were willing to, you know, take the brutal treatment of, you know, Vern Gagne or Stu Hart or whatever in order to get into the business. You came out of pocket, you got brutalized, and then maybe you make, you know, nickels and dimes after you get into business for a little while. You do the hot dog circuit, you do the tuna can circuit back in the day. You just eat cans of tuna and drive around in your car if you got one, or you ride in a car with a bunch of other musty, smelly people, and then that's it. That was your experience in wrestling. But now it's a little bit different. You know, WWE gives them money so they can go and rent cars. And yes, they have to rent their own cars, but WWE reimburses a lot of this stuff. And they pay people to train. And it does create a sense of entitlement. People forget, you know, how wrestling was and how fortunate those people who had it tough back in the day. How, you know, imagine if, you know, a guy like Ted DiBiase or a guy like Rick Rude was treated like they treat these kids today. It probably, for starters, Rick Rude would probably still be alive, for Christ's sake. You know, so it's a very interesting conversation to have. And I do believe that a lot of the wrestlers have gotten quite soft in the brain, and they tend to look at this as an entitlement situation and not as a blessing. That the business has changed so much that they're willing to pay you to show up, even if you're not worth it. Even if you have no marketable skills whatsoever, you're still paid to be there because they're willing to pay you to train people. They're willing to pay you to do stuff in the office or be a producer or something like that. There's always something for people to do. So there's always going to be this sort of, no matter how well you treat people, there's always going to be this underlying sense of resentment because it could be better. And maybe it'll get better, quote unquote, but who the hell knows what better means? It's like that, the drastic switch from you coming and sending tapes and trying to get a job to us going out and looking for you is a completely different ball game. So the next thing that he says that I find very interesting is that he basically said it's a different business now. He says it's a much healthier atmosphere than when I started. So you're talking about locker room culture, usually. You know, the drugs, the fist fighting, the bar fighting, that kind of stuff is no longer really allowed. You know, negative behaviors, which used to be signs of being a tough guy, it's not kind of weaned out now. You know, the company no longer cares if you lose fist fights in public. They don't even expect you to get into a fist fight in public. You know, back in the day, they expected it. They expected you to be out, be loud, and then some guy would try to come up to you and knock your block off. And then you would be able to stand up against him because you were a big, tough pro wrestler. But now today, you treat them almost like actors, where you're not expected to get into any fights. You're not expecting to get in any trouble. A guy like Seth Rollins, again, who got attacked by a fan. And recently, Don Callis just got attacked by somebody at a AAA show. It's not really a frown upon you anymore. It's more a frown upon the guy who attacked you. Back in the day, even if you got attacked blindsided, you still were expected to win that fight. Now, it's okay for you to be a wrestler and get beat up in public or whatever. We don't even really celebrate the heroics of wrestlers beating up other people in public anymore. You know, I think it might have happened. I think Daniel Bryan, didn't he wrestle some guy to the ground, you know, a couple of years ago? You know, there was a time where he would have been turned into a superhero because of that. But it was one of the things that kind of came and went in recent years, and nobody really talks about it. So yeah, it's a very different business, it's a very different culture. But I definitely think that the entitlement that comes from some of the wrestlers also comes from some of the fans. You know, like a lot of the fans today, they feel like they let me be a little bit more precise in my speech. They promote a culture of entitlement in the wrestler by saying that wrestlers should be treated like actors. Yeah, you know, actors, they get stretch limousines everywhere. They get, you know, treated to the best of everything, at least for the most part. Of course, relatively speaking, because not all actors, you know, get treated like the top level actors do. But what they don't understand is that a lot of the stuff that they complained about, you know, leading up to this, is what's caused, you know, wrestling to be soft. For instance, give you a good example. There was a lot of wrestling fans, hardcore wrestling fans, they hate the Total Divas era. They hate the Divas. Why? The Divas were treated much like they treat talent today. They saw a girl in a magazine or something like that and reached out to her and said, hey, are you interested in being a wrestler? How do you ever thought about this? You know, they paid for her to train, flew her in, you know, whole 9 yards. And she got paid, and she was not interested in wrestling at all. She didn't care about wrestling. She wanted to be a model. She wanted to be a school teacher or whatever. And then WWE came along, gave her some money, and put her on TV. And it's like, all she cares about is being on television. But then they promote this kind of stuff in wrestlers by, you know, a guy who really did go through the Chitlin circuit. They're trying to promote in him that he should act like a diva, you know, that WWE should come and reach out to you, pay you tons of money to train or be retrained, especially when it comes to indie wrestlers. They're basically being retrained. And they should give you stretch limousines and all this kind of stuff too, everywhere you go, and pay for all of your food, and pay for all of your travel, and pay for all your hotels, and pay for everything. So it's like, did you like Total Divas or did you not like Total Divas? Because if WWE is going to pick people that they want, you know, do the recruiting thing, they're not going to pick the people that you think. You know, they're not going to go out there and find some indie worker with 15 years experience who got 2 blown out knees and then treat them like, you know, Hollywood would treat like a Tom Cruise or something, like somebody like that. That's not how it's going to work. You know, they're going to go find them a young athlete like they do in NXT, and they're going to treat that talent well. They're going to recruit that talent. They're going to help that talent find an apartment. They're going to do all these. That's what they're doing now. And wrestling fans, they claim to hate this stuff because you're not getting people who really want to be wrestlers. You're getting people who look good, you know, who look good on TV, and then they complain. So it's like, what do you want exactly? And then they foist this upon the wrestlers. They try to perpetrate upon wrestlers that, you know, they're always being, poorly put upon, and they don't make enough money and all this kind of stuff. And it's sad that they don't really realize that the margin for error in this business is very small. That there's 100 wrestlers behind you. So if you start complaining, you start bitching, you start moaning, you get injured too much, you don't got the work ethic, they'll just replace you. You know? And then, well, there should be a union. Well, I'm not going down the union rabbit hole. Go into my archives and look up my thoughts on wrestling unions or unions in general. Or you could just look at the news and look at how people have been made jobless because other people have decided that you're not going to work. How crazy is that? You know, somebody makes the decision for you that you're not going to get to go to work. That's crazy, you know? So it's the nature of the beast. You know, the business is a lot softer. The Bill DeMotts, all those guys have been weaned out of the business now. You can't even raise your voice at talent anymore, you know, and it's for the good. It's also for the bad. You know, you understand that people are more motivated by harsh coaching, but now they have this supremely soft culture. And they letting Tony Khan, he doesn't fire people. He lets their contracts run out. Like, he's been unhappy with somebody for a long time. So instead of firing them, he'll just let them sit at home for weeks and weeks and weeks and then not talk to them. When, you know, some of the old coaches, you know, the Bill Watts or even the Vince McMahons, if they were not happy with your work, they fired you. You were fired. Now we're getting to the point where we don't even fire people anymore. We're just going to let their contract lapse. You know, and that's seen as being a nicer way of letting people go. When in reality, it's like, is that really nice to waste their time like this? Like, you're not interested in their work. You're not interested in booking them. Let them go. Let them go seek their fortunes elsewhere. You know, there's a harsh reality to being fired from a job. And if you get fired, you might actually be motivated to do something else. You know, you might actually be motivated to work harder if you were fired, rather than, well, we just have too many people on the roster and we're going to let you go. It's like that fake, phony, smiling human resources culture that we got here, where people never actually get better at anything because nobody ever tells them what they're doing wrong. As opposed to in the past, where a guy verbally berates you for being an idiot and then say you're a dumb fuck, you're fired. Then you're like, whoa. You know, I did something wrong, clearly. I got to make sure I don't do that at the next place I go to. And then maybe you take getting fired on the chin, and then you get a chance to come back or something like that. But, again, everything's gotten soft. The entire American culture has gotten soft. And we perpetrating entitlement in the children and perpetrating entitlement in everybody who works pretty much anywhere. You know, everybody complains. People, I mean, Uber is a job. You work out of your own goddamn car and people complain. Oh, I got to do all of this. It's like, it's your car. You know, like, you don't have to drive your car if you don't want to. There's no office. There's no boss standing behind you. There's nobody whipping you and making you. There's nobody calling you and saying you need to do something. You are in complete control of your own thing. And then people are like, Uber needs to have a union. It's like, what do you mean? If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. If you want to be a jitney, you can do that without doing Uber, without doing Lyft, without doing anything. How much sweeter can it be that you don't owe the company anything because you're using your own resources? You know, you want to drive your car anyway. But that's the crazy thing. Like, you know, I've seen so many people nowadays, you know, they want to work from home. And then you have the people saying, well, I'm turning my home into a workplace. The company is renting space in my home. It's like, what you want to work from home. If they said for you to come into the office, you would complain about that. So do you want to work from home or do you want to go into an office? Because if you want the company to pay you for your space in your house, but you also want to be in your house. Like, no, you can't have everything, you know? You got to make some kind of sacrifice. So it can be said about every, you know, facet of society that things have gotten a lot softer in society, but we don't see it that way because we've never seen the real struggles of people who came before us, you know? And it's been the same way with pretty much anything in society today. We think that everything is as terrible as possible when things used to be far worse than they are now. And we take things for granted. And I wish it wasn't the case, but of course wrestlers do this. You know, wrestlers in general are taking everything for granted. And we can't do that, you know? So, what do you guys think? Let me know. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.